Good morning, Nancy Windheart. I am so happy to have you here with me, I feel, at my dining table. I'm in Hong Kong and you're in Santa Fe, Mexico, a place that sounds New Mexico in the United States. I have to correct that. And it's always been this very romantic place that I envision. I've never visited it, but I've come to the States a lot, but its arts and crafts and everything of Santa Fe has always stood out. And thank you for being here today with us. And all you pet parents or animal lovers, any lover of plants, trees, any living beings, this is going to be super interesting, and it's going to bring this whole communication that we can have, interspecies communication, to another level. That's why I wanted Nancy to come here today to introduce this ability that we apparently all have. Nancy Windheart is an internationally recognized animal communicator and interspecies communication teacher. So get this, she can teach us, all of us. Her work has been featured in television, radio, magazine, and online media, and she has written for many digital and print publications. So she comes with a lot of knowledge. She teaches courses and training programs in interspecies communication and also Reiki for all species, for both lay people, people that have never really thought of being able to communicate with other living species on Earth, and um, and those who wish to participate professionally, and provides animal communication consultations and professional animal communication and Reiki mentoring for clients worldwide. Now, I know I come from Asia, I'm in Hong Kong, but I have to admit I don't know much about Reiki, and I'd like to understand that a bit more from you, Nancy. Nancy's writing is published in The Karma of Cats, and also um, Dark Matter, Women Witnessing Dreams Before Extinction. So we're going to put all this out, how to contact Nancy, and all about her bio and her website and everything. So you can always, after this chat that we're going to have with Nancy, learn more how to communicate with her. And definitely she can help us and guide us, because that's what she does. She teaches us how to communicate with such special beings. Nancy Windheart, thank you for being here. I want to say to you, this term, we're going to first talk about animal communication. This term, animal communication, I came across it when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s with a lot of dogs and pets around me in my childhood. We, as a little kid, I I knew animals were sentient beings. They had feelings. But I never thought that I could actually communicate with them. And so this concept of animal communication, I came across that not too long ago. I would say maybe 5, 6 years ago. And I thought, wow. And I thought I had to take a really in-depth course, because I looked at animal communication as something that, how you look at psychics, you have to be born with that ability. But then when I realized that it was something that I could learn, I wanted to learn it out of curiosity, because I also have a lot of pets, and it was only for fun, also in obedience training and just for fun, how to have more play and interaction with my pets. But I tell you, Nancy, a few months before my beloved Oliver, he just transitioned last month, and I'm fortunate enough about 2 months ago to come across your podcast. And the podcast was all about end of life, the transitioning, aging, hospice, transitioning eventually of your pet. And I didn't realize For me, at least in my experience, that was my first time being with an elderly pet that was aging. And I didn't realize how important it was to be able to communicate to Oliver and listen to him. This time it wasn't about me telling my pets through this form of mode of communication, okay, bring the ball back to me, or little things, just fun things, but I didn't realize how important it was at end of life. It was a very, very needless to say for all our pet lovers that's going to face losing a pet. This is inevitable. How beneficial this communication is with your animal to find out what his or her needs are and to make this transition as less painful as possible and less regrets during that time. Very painful. Nancy, please tell us how you came across this wonderful ability to communicate with interspecies.
Thank you, Nita. And I'm so happy to be spending this time with you. So thank you for inviting me to have this conversation with you.
Thank
So I, like many people, and it sounds like you also perhaps, remember having very close and important relationships with animals as a child. And in fact, they were my closest friends, my closest companions. And from my earliest memories, I wanted to be with them and spend time with them. And what I recognize now is that we had an easy understanding and communication that just flowed between us,
you.
which is the truth of this goes to the truth of everything that I teach and that I want to help people understand, which is that this way of understanding beings of other species is natural to all of us. We all come in knowing how to do this. It's our birthright. Many people can remember having these experiences as children, and many people will re-remember them once the idea has been kind of reawakened and reopened to them. And so that was my experience. And then, as happens with most of us in human cultures, it's changing now and it's different in cultures that are not as influenced by colonialism and the ideas that have been uh, uh, dominant in so many cultures for so long, that humans are superior and that our ways of understanding and thinking and knowing are the most important. But for most of us, we've been kind of enculturated into forgetting this natural ability
Mhm,
and discounting these ways of knowing that are part of who we are and part of how we come in.
mhm,
And that happened to me as well. Through my family, through the culture that I was in. And so I always loved animals and continued to have relationships with them. But I went on as a young woman and a young adult to have a career in music. I was a professional classical musician
mhm,
and taught piano and thought I was going to be having an academic life that would involve, teaching and performing in the classical music world. And I did do that for a couple of decades. But what happened was when I was completing my doctoral program in music, I adopted my first dog that I'd had as an adult. My family had had dogs in our, as family pets, but as an adult, this was the first dog that I had adopted. And he came from a shelter, and there was an animal communicator at the time, and this was in the early 90s, so several decades ago, who volunteered her time at the shelter.
mhm,
And I watched her work and I went, oh, it reminded me. I remembered. I went, oh, right, I remember doing that. That's how I was when I was a young child. I haven't done that for a long time, but I know exactly what she's doing. And so that began this process of for me, reawakening. And I started, I became friends with this woman. She happened to live in my neighborhood. She came and communicated with the, but shortly after that, I adopted another dog, and then I started, fostering and getting involved with the shelter. And so all of that just began this other track in my life,
Yeah.
where I was reading and learning and studying and reawakening for myself this way of communicating.
Yes.
And so for a period of many, many years, I had my professional work as a teacher and a musician, and I had my animal work as in rescue and with my own family members, my own companions. And I did a lot of that. And those two kind of, ran parallel side by side without really crossing each other. Until a certain time came, I was teaching at a school. It was a boarding high school for young people who wanted to become professional artists,
Mhm.
either as musicians or actors or dancers or whatever their field was. And there was a large feral cat colony at the school, and I became involved with feral cat rescue and
Mm.
trap, neuter, return,
Oh
and
yeah.
working with the rescue organizations. And this wonderful cat, who's I've written his story in that book that you mentioned in the introduction, in The Karma of Cats. This wonderful beat up feral tomcat just had a hard life, and was missing his ears from his life on the streets and all of the hardship that he went through. But he came into my life, and I ended up adopting him,
Mm.
and he became one of my most important teachers and friends and guides. And he, more than any other being at that time in my life, he taught me how to get quiet so I could hear him. He taught me how to listen to him. He taught me how to, I call him my first real meditation teacher, because I'd studied meditation with humans, but not until I met Freddie did I really have a meditation teacher like that, who really showed me, this is how you do it. This is how you get quiet. And so he was such an important teacher, friend, companion in my life. And he had come to me FIV positive. And so he eventually, after some of our years together, he eventually transitioned
Mm.
and passed into the spirit world and continued to teach and guide me from the other side. And so at a certain point, he came and really communicated to me, okay, it's time for you now to really step more fully onto this path of
Mm.
animal communication. And so I began a series of a time of real formal intensive study
Mhm.
and learning and apprenticeship and studying in many related spiritual disciplines, such as Reiki that you mentioned, and also
Mhm.
yoga and meditation and many other things that help to support the animal communication. And then at a certain point, my I just kind of moved away from my life in the music world. I didn't really set out to do that, but that's just what happened. I
Mhm.
Because I became more and more drawn and passionate and committed to this path with the animals. And of course, I understand now that's because that was where I was meant to be, right?
Yeah.
And so it just kind of evolved in the way that these things do when you're on your path and you're following, this impulse that is, what really, for me, I feel it's what I'm here to do. And so I'm coming up on my 20th year next year of practicing as a professional animal communicator, where I've been working with clients, and as you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of my work now, the bulk of my work now is teaching and training other people, and helping other people to remember and to learn and to recognize that this is This is our birthright. We're meant to be able to understand each other in this way. And I find that most people who have had relationships with animals, who live with them, they know this on some level. They may doubt their own ability to really be able to hear and to understand, but they know on some level that this is possible. And once you have that understanding, and once you have that glimmer of appreciation that, you know, as you said when you first discovered that this is a thing, right? This is something that, you know, that's possible, then it just opens up. And our animal friends and companions so often will just come with so much support and like, yes, we want to help them. We want to help them learn. We want to help them remember. We want to help them, remember this language because I call it a universal language. This is the language that's underneath all of our species specific languages.
Oh,
Right. And other beings other than humans, they have their own languages too that they communicate with in their own way, their species language, right? But we underneath all that is this universal language. All
correct.
beings have it. And we are the only species as humans. I was talking with a beloved colleague this morning in another interview, who was given the term majority beings, majority animals, majority beings by a whale who showed her that, you know, rather than saying other than human, more than human, which still centers humans in the middle of everything, recognizing that the majority animals, the majority beings who are not human, there are many more of them, right, than there are of us, and recognizing that we are the only species that has lost the universal language. We're the only
Yes.
species that's forgotten it. None of the others have. And so they're all there. They're all, and so many of them are so willing to help us and to partner with us in such a benevolent and kind and loving way to help us remember, to help us relearn it, to welcome us back into the circle of life, the web of life. And so they're happy when we want to learn, right? And they're patient, most of the time when we're slow and we're clumsy and we don't get it. And, we have to be corrected, but they help us, right? Because they want us to be connected in that way.
You have said that so beautifully because you brought a memory just now to my mind. Um, I have a place in the mountains, and where, because I'm just like you, quite a bit into yoga and meditation. So when I do my morning practice, all my pets and they normally jump on my bed and give me 100 kisses and licks. But when I'm doing my practice, I'm in meditation, they somehow know, and they tiptoe and they all jump on the bed, but very quietly, and they'll sit around me until I'm done with my practice. So I started realizing things like this. And the memory that you brought up for me, and I didn't realize it until this very moment, because we're speaking about interspecies. Interspecies, from my knowledge, means all living beings. It's the trees, it's sea life, it's your pets. And I have this wonderful tree that was this small in the garden outside my house. And after the house is now 30 years old, so I've had that much experience being in that house. And about 3 years ago, the neighbors came and said, Nita, you have to cut down that big tree and it grew really tall. You have to cut down that big tree, because maybe it could be dangerous if it falls down. I didn't even listen to anything. Suddenly I blanked out and I looked at this person and I said, I don't know what inside me said right away to this person, no, I will not cut this tree down. And I blurted out, I didn't realize it. I blurted out, this tree has been the witness of my life for the last 30 years. Nancy, I promise you, I don't know where it came from until now. And I didn't realize what I was doing for 30 years. I was actually speaking to that tree each time, and that tree was always in front of the living room, outside in the garden. So whatever was happening in the living room with friends, family, the 30 Christmases, or maybe less than that, it wasn't that I was always in the house, but definitely very, very important years for me with my family, my children growing up. We shared grief together, good times, bad times, times of losses and sadness. That tree stood tall in front of my living room, and I never realized that I was communicating with that tree all those years. And only when someone brought it to my attention and said, that tree's got to go, did I realize what a bond I had developed with that special, beautiful, living being.
Mhm.
And now when I go back to that house, I'm actually going to consciously make an effort to thank that tree for being there. I took that tree for granted that it was there, but only when it comes to, okay, it's not going to be there anymore, did I realize there wasn't a sort of a huge attachment level to that
Mhm.
tree.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
going back to interspecies communication, or it's a new concept, okay? It's a new concept, but it blows my mind the way it's now getting more and more mainstream. And now, uh, bef 3 years ago, I was a bit reluctant to even speak to a veterinarian or anything about, oh, I'm studying animal communication. I'm not reluctant. They all get it. They all
yeah,
get it.
yeah.
Maybe they're not practicing it, but they're getting it, and by leaps and bounds. So this communication, Nancy, I would like you to make it clear for me and to all of us. It's something, like you said, it's not something that you need to learn and get a certification before you can start looking at your pet and communicating. It's something that we innately have.
Yes,
We have
yes,
it.
absolutely. Yes. And it is, the language that we use to talk about it, animal communication, interspecies communication, that language may be new or newer, but this is a way of being and a way of knowing and an understanding that indigenous cultures worldwide have
Correct?
been practicing for, you know,
Yes.
thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? And also that even in our cultures where we have lost it, our Western cultures, our cultures where we have this the technology and all of the things that have been influential in helping us to forget, right?
Yeah.
But that's just one layer, right?
Yeah.
And there have always been people. There have
Yeah.
always been people who've had this way of knowing and who haven't forgotten. And there have always been people who have remembered, whether on purpose or by accident, having an experience with an animal that just shatters them, right? Or like, with your tree, recognizing, oh, I've had a relationship with this tree for 30 years. I maybe wasn't conscious of it, but it was there. The relationship was there, the communication is there, the connection is there, right? And so it's a matter of really just understanding this isn't something, number one, it's not something special. It's not something that only certain people can do. And number two, no, it doesn't need, years and years and years and years of study and training. It's a natural ability. Now, what I do tell people is if you want to use that ability in such a way to really hone it and refine it and use it in a way that's ethical, where you're sure that you're clear, where you're sure that your own human thoughts are not getting involved, where you have skills of negotiating and conflict resolution and all of those kinds of skills. If you want to use this skill in a capacity to help others, then I think, yes, it is useful to do some training with a mentor, with a
Yes.
teacher. That's the bulk of what I do, right?
Right.
But I want to differentiate that it's not necessary. Like there are plenty of people who are communicating in this way who've never taken a class at all, right? But they've either always, known it and haven't forgotten it, or it has reawakened in them naturally in some other kind of way apart from a formal course of study,
Yeah.
right? But when we're relearning, when we're reawakening, it's useful a lot of times for many of us to have support from somebody who's farther down the path, who
Yeah.
has the tools and has some experiences and can just encourage and say, yes, yes, this is real. You're not making this up. You're not crazy.
Yes.
This happened. Yes, that's authentic. And, and to help you see too, if you are going off track and kind of going into your own human ideas, oh, right, that's not quite authentic. This is what the authentic communication is. It's
Correct.
helpful to have that for many, many people, but the ability itself is as natural as breathing. This is we all can engage and be with each other in this way.
I learned a lot. And like you said, Nancy, it is something that actually we all can do. It's sort of like a muscle we've never used before. And this muscle, I believe, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, is the muscle of the heart. And this is
Mm,
communication. It's a heart to heart communication to animals, trees. The I feel very, very often complicate things because they have to then be translated and then people's own perceptions and whatever, what they hear and what we say are two different things. But the heart never lies. And
yes.
when you have it in that and you communicate and you look at your pet and you speak from the heart, I feel that there is an energetic um, exchange taking place between my pet and me, myself, and the tree. That's how I started to
Mhm.
experiment because I needed that course. That wasn't I didn't even complete the course. I took 3 sessions and I already started practicing it. And the more you practice it, and then I didn't have time to complete the course, but I started practicing it and I felt it became easy and easier. However, I did feel, and anyone taking the course will always feel sometimes they'll have doubts. Very often they'll have doubts when it comes to matters that are slightly more serious than being playful. And the doubt that came to me was one of my dogs suddenly, after 3 years of walking a certain path, he suddenly didn't want to walk that path anymore. And um, he would become hysterical the minute he saw that path. So I did consult an animal communicator, a professional one, because this was getting out of hand. And I have other pets that go for their walks, and because of him, all the others, including him and us, we had to reroute and find another way to get to the beach. And with the animal communicator, she's very professional, like you. And then I sought help, and yes, there were some issues with my dog where he felt something was not right, but it was on a deeper level. And the way that was communicated to me made sense. There was something going on in in my life. And so it did make sense. And this animal communicator is not a friend, doesn't know anything about my life. So I find that very very interesting. So there's both ways. You can learn how to communicate, but I also believe sometimes things in your mind, you feel, oh, I might have this wrong. And that's when people like you also step in, not only teaching us and giving us the tools to communicate, but saying, Nancy, I want a session with you because this is beyond me. And
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
only had a few training hours, you can say, but this is beyond me. So I think both ways, people like you
Mhm.
are very, very much needed. And I love the fact that you can say, hey, I can teach you the tools because everyone can learn that. But also at times when it's very challenging to go to a professional and say, okay, don't teach me anymore. Now communicate with my pet. Please help me out here. There's something that I'm not understanding, or maybe I am, but I'm second guessing
Mhm.
myself.
Yeah.
This might not be.
Yeah.
Again, going back, the how beneficial this is. Nancy, when bye bye, all my doggies do. I come here, Benji, Gracie. You have to see them a little bit. So this one is my newest, is my baby, and he's extremely naughty. This one ate my mouth guard, and I had a good talk with her last week. No eating my mouth guard. Say hi to Nancy. Okay, well, I'm not gonna do the show and tell with the rest of them, but there's five of them. But
Oh,
I
they're so
because these were
beautiful.
smaller to carry, the other ones I can't carry. And you have how many pets do you have now, Nancy?
I have in my animal family, I have three dogs. I have two Afghan hounds and a Chihuahua Dachshund mix.
No.
And then I've got three cats and I have a little flock of bantam chickens. I have 13 bantam chickens.
So you eat fresh eggs every day?
When they're laying, yeah, I do eat.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. It's winter here now, so they're not laying so many eggs now. But
that's lovely. So I wanted to talk to you, still sticking to animal communication before we get into Reiki. We will get into that because that's I'm very curious about that. I've never been exposed to that, but yet. But animal communication. So when I looked at it, and as I delved a little deeper into this short course that I took, I thought, wow, I looked at my pets and I said, I did not realize how much of an emotional support you all have been to me, and I took it for granted that you were there. I didn't realize how much I could nurture you also through this communication because you have needs that are not just food and play and water and stroking. There are other things that you have needs for, and there what I started realizing, they have a wisdom that is so incredible. Just that energy of having them around me in times of deep sadness. So I felt what we are overlooking a huge thing. We're overlooking a young generation that is struggling with they have emotional and mental challenges. And wouldn't this form of communication be so important for that young generation to say, hey, you're alone at home at the moment, but you're not alone. You have the plants, or maybe you're fortunate enough to have a garden with trees, and you have your pet right here who you can communicate with, and not only just feel solace in stroking the pet, but the pet will listen to you if you've had a hard day in school, will listen to you if someone bullied you. And I feel breaking through those barriers of understanding that there is so much love, so much more love and wisdom all these species can give you. And when you said they have patience, Nancy, I loved what you said because I felt very guilty. Oh my goodness, I've ignored this tree for 30 years only when I'm reminded this tree's got to go down. But you're right. For 30 years, this tree did not fail me, and I only gave it water. That's it. But I never looked at it as, my goodness, until that moment came. So for them, it's great for that generation, for the elderly who are alone at home with their beautiful dog. they can actually form that it makes that relationship with their dog or with their cat so much more deeper and so much more healing for both each other, where the suffering, the emotional the suffering that we all go through does not have to happen to that extent because we've been brought here, not alone, we've been brought here by these, not by, but with these incredible species on planet Earth, where you came very strongly into my life, Nancy, was with end of life. So I listened to your podcast, and a week later, I was seeing Oliver really regress. He's my 16-year-old golden retriever. A week after your podcast, I went to the veterinarian, and the vet, with tears, a wonderful, wonderful vet, no matter how many years she's had to give her clients this news, she's always affected. And she knew Ollie for all those years. She knew Ollie, and she looked at me and she said, Nita, Ollie unfortunately has cancer at this age. At this stage, operation is not possible. And so she gave me what to expect, how long, and everything. And thank you, Nancy Windheart, from the bottom of my heart. I looked at her. She had tears. I didn't have tears yet. I said to the veterinarian, okay, thank you very much. And for all the testing that she had done on Oliver, and that she was gentle with Ollie and decided not to do any invasive testing with more biopsies, which is so painful for Oliver, with uh, more and more biopsies. And we both looked at each other, and again there was an unsaid um, exchange without words, me and my veterinarian, because she knew that I was studying animal communication. And without judgment from her, I said to her, thank you. I think I'm going to go home with this information. I'm going to process this information. And for me, the most important is not to make any decision right now, is to know that Ollie's not in pain. And how am I going to take care of him during hospice while he's at home? And then I will come back to you. And I'm I'm going to need you for more and more guidance when it comes to the physical changes in Oliver and all that. But I think I'm going to go home and have a conversation with Ollie. And I looked at Ollie right there and then, and I kid you not, he looked at me. He was right there in the vet office, and he said, Mommy, come on, let's go to the beach. Seriously. I thought I imagined it, but no, there was this huge emotion that he filled me with this emotion. He looked at me, he looked at the vet. Okay, are we done now? Can we now please go to the beach? I took him to the beach. Needless to say, a lot of crazy thoughts through my mind at the beach. Oliver grounded me. He taught me an important lesson. Mom, come back to the present moment. Come back. We're in front of the beach. Look at the sea, Mom. Maybe I don't have the energy anymore to run up and down and be as playful like I used to be, run in and out of the water. You know that. I've slowed down. I can't walk that much anymore. But I'm fine. Look, I'm enjoying. And literally, you're bringing me back on that journey on the day that Ollie was diagnosed. And it's a bittersweet journey, but it was not a traumatic shock or extremely painful time. And extremely painful. It was in a very gentle, loving, controlled manner. And thank you, Nancy, for that. I brought him home, and the way you said how we can communicate. And that is where I felt, for me, in all of Ollie's life with me, his 16 years, where I could give back and I could communicate and say, okay, Ollie, do you want to eat this? Are you in pain? What do I do? Shall we go to the beach or shall we just stay home? And there were days where he didn't feel like going anywhere. I wasn't alarmed. He communicated it beautifully. I think I'll stay home today. Ollie transitioned within a month of diagnosis. I had I had thought, even the veterinarian thought, 3 to 6 months, but he went fast. And but again, being able to understand this form of communication from the heart made it so much more loving. And like you said, um, when the time came that I had to make that decision because of his lack of abilities in the house and his body function and everything, it was it was it was definitely a lot less painful. He was able to tell me when it was time, when he's had enough.
Mhm.
And those, have you helped people with this whole transitioning process and making a decision on whether, see, because I watched you, I was able to make that decision of having him eventually, going through the euthanizing process. It's still difficult to me to verbalize it, but you know what I mean. That decision, big thank you for that podcast because it made it very clear in my heart and in Ollie's heart that was communicated. But I'm sure pet parents who are going to face an inevitable situation here and have to make that decision, how beneficial it would be if they have not been able yet to explore this form of communication. Can you help them with that?
Yes, and that's a large part of the work that I've done for many, many years. And I consider it some of the most important work that I ever do. It's such a holy time,
Yes.
and it's such a deep time, and it can be hard. And it can be beautiful. And just that story that you shared about Ollie, and what happened for both of you, and his beautiful communication of let's go to the beach,
Yeah.
right? And the way that you were able to stay in touch with him,
Yeah.
during that time, and that is possible for everyone. And as you said previously, there are times sometimes when we also need someone else to help, right? And
Yes.
that's where a professional animal communicator who's
Yes.
really skilled and who isn't directly involved can be really helpful. And I mean, even those of us who are professional animal communicators, when we have something really difficult with our own animals, I know I have a couple of trusted colleagues and friends that if I need help, I'll call them, right? It's always helpful to have another person to
It
kind of
is.
walk with you if you can. And also that sense of partnership that you so beautifully described with Oliver, right? That's the essence of everything we're talking about here. It's walking together in partnership and him having agency. Him
Yes.
saying, well, as one of my own dogs said toward the end of his life after he got a cancer diagnosis, and I was devastated. He said, well, I'm not dead yet. Let's go for
Yes.
a walk, right? Not dead yet,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly. Yeah.
and it's that teaching, that walking together, and that beautiful partnership of the day-to-day decisions, the day-to-day life that you share together, and that in this case, it sounds like it was, though difficult, also very, very gentle and very loving, and that you could feel um, peace in the fact that you understood that he was ready. He was ready when the time came for him
Yeah.
to have help leaving his body, and so that that's possible for everyone, and I think it's so important to recognize that as this time of uh, real possibility of a deeper connection and a deeper relationship and a deeper understanding of the that I mean, and animals understand this innately, that they have spent time in a physical body, but that they are not simply the physical body, and that their spirit, their essence, their soul, whatever language you want to use, that
Absolutely.
that that is not tied to permanently the physical body, and so that the physical body can go, but that essence remains. And that's where also it's possible for us to remain in connection, as I, shared about with my cat Freddie, after they've left their body. That's also possible that we can remain in connection with them, even when they're on the other side, when they're in the spirit world. And that becomes that thread that continues in our relationship and in our partnership with each other. And I think for people to understand that that also is possible, that you walk together through the transition, you listen to each other, you receive their input, they, letting them have agency to the extent that they can about what their choices are, what's happening with them, and then recognizing that that relationship does not end with the death, but that it can continue.
Beautiful, beautiful. Your words are absolutely so wonderful in the way you articulate it, Nancy, because I have to tell you, Ollie transitioned, and from now I'm using that word transition. I don't use anymore passed away or death, because like you said, we are souls. And I learned so much this year. 2025 has been really horrific, challenging, but yet an extreme year of inner growth for me. My mother transitioned 5 months ago, less 4 months ago. Ollie transitioned last month. So in a space of 4 months, I've had my two, I mean, people or living beings that I love to no end. And what you just said, and I listened to you in your last podcast, even after they're gone, you can still communicate with them. And you're right. So when I heard you, because it applies to all souls, right? It not
Yeah.
only animals, but human beings too. So my question to you is, okay, now Oliver, and I did it by the way, and I'll tell you about my experience. Oliver has transitioned. Okay? Day two. We're all very sad in the house. I walked through the door, Nancy. My big golden retriever, Oliver. I mean, all my other pets come and greet me, and I'm very grateful for all of them being home, but they're also sad. They also feel Ollie's loss
Sure.
because he was the
Sure.
biggest in the house. But that big, beautiful Oliver with his big wagging tail, you know how retrievers are. They come and they kiss you so much. They don't let any of the other uh, pets come near me until he's gotten, acknowledgement. He does not come and greet me. So that sadness is there. How how long does one wait to say, okay, now I'm gonna look for Ollie and get an animal communicator if I cannot communicate. Get a professional and ask this professional animal communicator to start uh, communicating with Ollie. I want to know how Oliver is. How long does one wait in that period? Can one do it right after the transitioning, or is there, according to your experience, a period where you kind of just let him be for a while? What is your opinion?
Yeah, in my experience, there's no rule about it. And I've communicated many times with animals, including my own in my own family, right after the transition, and in those days, hours, days, weeks immediately following. So it is definitely possible. And for sometimes animals will go into, and I think this is true for all souls, will kind of go into a time of healing or quiet, and also what they communicate about how they communicate will vary in the time after the transition, right? So what the communication is in the minutes, the hours, the days right after a passing may be very different than what the communication is, a month or a year or 5 years later,
Mhm.
right? And so in my experience, there's no rule about it. I know
Okay.
some people will say you should wait for 3 days or 40 days, or different
Yeah,
human spiritual traditions have different ideas
correct.
about that transition time. But in my experience, the communication will happen in the right time and
Yes.
in the right way.
Yes. Well, I never took animal communication as seriously as I did these past few months.
Yeah,
Not only in helping him, helping both of us navigate through this difficult time, but for me, another huge thing was, yes, the fact that you can communicate. So they're not gone. That's why now I use the word transition. They're
right.
not gone. I mean, last week, I kid you not, I went to sleep and I had a challenging week, a personal challenging week for something. Uh, and I went to sleep and I said, Ollie, just come to me and tell me that you're still around because normally you jump on my bed and I'd feel your big body trying to shove me out of bed. And I always used to complain, you're taking over such big space. But please come to me and make me feel that you're still here with me. And he appeared. So that was really wonderful.
Reiki is it's a very beautiful practice. Came to us it came to us from Japan in the 1920s, what we know of as Reiki today.
Yeah.
And it has very ancient origins. And so in a very brief summary of Reiki is it is a form of energy healing. And so it can be practiced both hands-on physically, and maybe people have experienced that in going to a Reiki practitioner and having a hands-on Reiki healing session. That's one way that it can be practiced, but it's
Yeah.
also a very deep spiritual and meditation practice. And so there's many layers to Reiki, and it's a healing modality. It can be very useful for supporting any other kind of physical, medical, veterinary modalities that are being used. It can be used for physical support. It can be also be used for mental, emotional support, for helping with our relationships. There's a lot that I could say about it, but Reiki, as it's traditionally known, has been practiced primarily as a human to human kind of practice.
Correct.
And when we practice Reiki with animals, we want to be sure that we're practicing Reiki in a way that is appropriate for them, species appropriate, right?
Yeah.
And so when I teach what I call my program, I call Reiki for all species.
Oh,
That's what we're really talking
interesting.
about is taking Reiki and the practices of Reiki and working with them, not just with other humans, but with beings of all species. You can
Correct.
practice Reiki with trees, with plants, and
Wow.
and it's a beautiful modality. If people want to learn more, you can have a look at my website, and there's a lot of information there. I also have some free resources about
Thank
Reiki,
you.
and how Reiki and animal communication, they're different. They're different practices, and they're different kind of ways of engaging, but there can be a lot of overlap. And oftentimes, Reiki and animal communication can very much work together as well. And so I found that when people practice Reiki, they can become more open to receiving the communication. And so they can work together really beautifully.
So, people around the world, like we are here in Asia, can we contact you and say, look, something with my pet? He's not feeling well, he's not eating his food or stuff like that. And can you do Reiki? And you're sitting in Santa Fe. Can you just do
Yes, Reiki can be
and sit
practiced at a
there?
distance. Yes, just like telepathic communication, it can be practiced at a distance.
Because
Um,
it's
so
energy.
because it's energy, right? And I always encourage people because I'm a teacher, that's what I do. And I think Reiki as a practice is so valuable. Reiki's easy to learn. It's not complicated. Anybody can learn it. You don't have to have any special abilities or, capacities. Any children can learn it, anyone can learn it.
No
It's
way.
easy, it's simple, yep. And it's something that I just think everyone should, everyone that's interested should have access to. So,
Wow.
you can work with a practitioner, and I always encourage people to learn Reiki for themselves, because it's easy and
I
it's
did not know
wonderful.
that because
Yeah,
people that,
yeah,
that I've met and they are, oh, we are a Reiki practitioner and we got level one from our master and level two from our master. And I thought, oh boy, this is a big deal. You have to go through, master's training and all that. But now you're telling me that even kids can do that. This is huge.
absolutely. Yes.
And
And
you
there
teach
are
this?
different lineages in the Reiki traditions. There's
Correct.
different ways, and there's some variation in terms of what's required and how it's taught, how it's transmitted. And it is indeed, it's simple, but it's also very deep. So I don't mean to minimize
Okay.
the depth of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But in its essence, it is not a complicated practice.
Oh, and do you
So
teach that too,
I
Nancy?
do. Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I am going to let you go because you have doggies to feed.
I do.
It's morning time here. I have doggies to walk and take to the beach, and it's evening time and your doggies are hungry and they're ready to have their
That's
dinner.
right.
I thank you so much. Everything, everyone will be on our website, how to get in touch with Nancy. Animal communication will benefit you, will benefit your pets, will benefit your children, your parents. I think it's something that has really transformed me. And I thank you for explaining this to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deeja. It's been wonderful to connect with you and have this
Oh,
conversation. And
thank you so
thanks to
much.
all who will be listening to this. And it's a wonderful world. And I look forward to,
It is
you
a
know,
wonderful world. We just forgot. We
we
learned
just,
language, talking and
yeah,
reading and writing, and that messed things up. But
that's right. That's right. Thank you. And thank you for all the good work that you're doing.
you too. Bye bye. Bye,
Bye
Nancy.
bye.